All right, best practices for managing updates. There's a few things as a user or administrator of Sugar that you should be following. You want to follow, if the Sugar community, I think, is community.sugarcrm.com.
Yep.
There's a bunch of different spaces in there. One of the spaces is releases. If you sign up for the community, you can follow that space and get email notifications whenever a new version of Sugar or a plugin is released. And when that is released, you're going to want to take a look at the release notes so that you know what's new or what's changed. You can plan for training on those changes. You know what to test. You also want to make sure, especially if you're on-premise, that you're paying attention to the supported platforms matrix. You don't want to end up in a situation where you have to upgrade from version 7.7 to version 7.8 to version 8.9 to version 8.0 all in one weekend, and realize that each version of Sugar requires a different server stack of Apache, PHP, and MySQL. That's going to be 4 very major upgrades in one weekend, and that makes for a very long weekend. You can also make sure that the right people are receiving notifications related to your Sugar instance, whether that's on-demand cloud upgrades or system maintenance notifications. If you go into all of your system administrators should get those emails, but also if you go into admin notification tools, you can sign up people who may not even be Sugar users for notifications. Maybe you have an IT staff that you want to have notified, but they're not actually a Sugar user. You can do that there.
Once you know that a new version of Sugar has been released, or a new version of a plugin or whatever, it's important to be sure that you're testing that upgrade before you push it to production. So have a plan for testing upgrades. If you're using Sugar Enterprise, you've got sandboxes that Sugar will give you for free as part of that subscription, so you have spaces to test in. And make sure you have a process around what that should look like. So once you get notified of a new release, who is going to decide which sandbox to use for this purpose, for testing the upgrade? Do you need to get that sandbox refreshed from production first, so it's a current copy of your system, and then get that request submitted to technology advisors or to Sugar to upgrade that sandbox so that you can start testing? Once the sandbox is ready, who's going to test what in the sandbox? So what do you need to test? What processes are important to your business that you want to make sure didn't change, didn't break? And who's going to be responsible for doing that? And then how will you know that that's happened and what the outcomes were? So what's your process for sharing that feedback, especially if you have multiple people involved in testing, making sure that you've got a system in place for how to collect that feedback and make sure everything's good to go so that you can get your production upgrade scheduled. In terms of what to test with your upgrade, focus on, number one, key business processes or key business procedures. If there are things that you're managing out of Sugar that your business would grind to a halt if that process stopped working for half a day or a day because something broke in an upgrade, that's something you want to make sure you test every time, because you want to make sure that if there's key things like that they don't go down. If you have any customizations in Sugar, especially anything that was done through a code customization, that's not likely to break in an upgrade, but it's the most likely thing to break in an upgrade. And so that's something that you want to make sure you have a list of what those customizations are and that you're checking those every time to make sure they're not going to break. Again, especially if that's something that feeds into a key business process. And then I didn't put it on the side here, but to Justin's point a minute ago, you also want to pay attention to the release notes and know what's going to change and test anything that impacts your business processes related to those changes.
Sugar releases updates to a regular cadence for on-premise customers, people who are installed locally or in a private cloud. They release an annual release every spring. This is generally a pretty big release because it includes all 4 of the cloud quarterly releases. And these annual releases may require platform upgrades. That would be your web server, generally Apache, your SQL server, generally MySQL, PHP, Elasticsearch, are all things that you may have to upgrade during your sugar upgrade. Security patches are released throughout the year as necessary, and each on-premise release is supported for 18 months from the release, so you need to plan to upgrade at least once a year. And think about who is responsible for that. Are you doing it yourselves, or are you going to hire the partner to do it? With the cloud, you get more regular releases, quarterly releases, and whenever a release comes out, you can request to test that release in a sandbox first, but then automatic updates will start happening, and you can only delay for so long when you're in the cloud.